Alright, have to go over our last reference table page, which is page 12. Using your sling cyclometer. Remember, here's my dry bulb temperature thermometer. That's going to be my air temperature. Here's my wet bulb thermometer. Going to use the sling cyclometer and the information from the dry and wet bulb to figure out my dew point and also my relative humidity. So, if I were saying, first couple things, dry bulb, air temperature, wet bulb, I'm going to have the water evaporate off it. So, the closest or the highest the wet bulb can be is the same temperature as the dry bulb. And that would mean nothing has evaporated off. Your air is totally saturated with water. Nothing will evaporate. So, your humidity, relative humidity, would be 100%. Other than that, your wet bulb is always going to be less than your dry bulb. So let's look at this one. First thing, looking at dew point, notice my units in degrees Celsius. So dry bulb is my air temperature. They go by twos instead of doing every other one. Notice it says difference between wet and dry bulb, so you have to do a little math here. So, mathematically, let's say our dry bulb is 26 degrees Celsius, and we'll say our wet bulb is 20 degrees Celsius. How would you figure out the dew point, and then how would you figure out the relative humidity? So my wet bulb is 6 degrees less than my dry bulb. So I'm going to my dry bulb being 26. My difference between 26 and 20 is 6. So I find the 6th column because that's the difference. Read down that column until I hit my dry bulb temperature. So my dew point would be 17 degrees Celsius. If I was trying to figure out what the relative humidity was for those numbers, same thing, but I need to make sure I'm reading it. I'm on the relative humidity. Go down to 26 degrees for my dry bulb or my air temperature. My difference is 6. So when I read, come down, my relative humidity is 57%. Alright, so that's the easiest way to do it. Sometimes they will give you the relative humidity and the dry bulb temperature and ask you to figure out what the wet bulb temperature is. Or they might give you the dry bulb temperature and the relative humidity and ask you what the dew point is. So I want to go over a couple examples of that one. So let's go with the dry bulb being 14 degrees Celsius. My dry bulb temperature is 14 degrees Celsius, and we're going to say our relative humidity is 50%. So with that one, I need you to figure out what the dew point is. What the dew point is and also what the wet bulb is. So same thing, I'm going to go over to my dry bulb temperature being 14. I am going to read over until I hit 50%. 50%, the difference between my wet and dry bulb is 5 degrees Celsius. Now, I already told you that the wet can't be higher than the dry. So I take 14 degrees Celsius minus 5, my wet bulb would be 9 degrees Celsius. To get to my dew point, my difference was 5, my dry was 14, so 14, I go over till I have the 5, see where it intersects, and my dew point would be 4 degrees Celsius. You need to make sure that you are not forgetting to subtract the wet and dry bulb. Also that if they start with relative humidity, that you're using the relative humidity chart and not the dew point chart. Alright, so let's do one more. My dry bulb, we'll say, is 10 degrees Celsius. My wet, we'll say, is 7 degrees Celsius. So let's do one that's not an even number, and I need you to figure out what the dew point is. So dry is 10, I'm coming to the 10. My difference between 10 and 7 is 3. So make sure you're not counting over because the first one is 0. So to the 3. Alright, so it's going to be 4 degrees Celsius. Now, if my dry bulb temperature, let's change that up and say it was 13 degrees Celsius, how would you figure out what your dew point was? Well, I'd come down here, 13 is between 12 and 14. My difference in 13 and 7 would be 6. I go over to the 6th column. What the difference is, 13, I come over here. If I'm looking at 12, 12 is negative 2. And 14 is 1, so you gotta do a little math. The difference is 3, so I'm gonna add 1.3 to negative 2. So your dew point would be negative 0.5 degrees Celsius. So you would have to find the average, or what the difference would be in between. Alright. One more. Let's do one more. I give you dry. And I give you relative humidity. Dry, we're going to say, is 30 degrees Celsius. And the relative humidity, 93%. So I want to know what the dew point is. I want to know what the wet bulb is. So I'm going up here, going to my 30. My relative humidity, I read over. My difference is 1. So I know my wet bulb is going to be 29 degrees Celsius. Come up here, 30, difference 1. My dew point is 29 degrees Celsius. Okay? If you have any questions, make sure you contact me. I'll be posting another video of how to do this, besides myself doing it. They're just going to do more of a general. But like I said, make sure you are reading carefully. Make sure you realize that you have to subtract the difference between the wet and dry. And that if they're asking relative humidity, you're using the relative humidity chart. And they're asking dew point, you use the top one. Alright, so we're going to try this example. My dry bulb temperature, or my air temperature, is 12 degrees Celsius. My wet bulb is 10 degrees Celsius. Alright, so remember, I need to find out what the difference is between the two. So my difference between 12 and 10 is 2 degrees Celsius. So I'm going to line myself up so I have my chart. 2 is my difference. And my dry is 12. Find my 12, come over where they intersect. That is going to be my relative humidity. So my relative humidity is going to be 78%. Now I'm going to go up and do the same exact thing with my dew point. So again, my difference is 2. My dry bulb is 12. Come over, read over. My dew point is 8 degrees Celsius. Alright, let's try one more. My dry bulb is negative 2 degrees Celsius. Don't know what my wet is. Don't know what my relative humidity is. Got my dew point of negative 13 degrees Celsius. So, got my dry, negative 2. I am going to read over until my dew point is negative 13. So I read over to negative 13. My difference is 3. Reminder, the wet can't be greater than the dry, so I got to subtract. So, negative 2 minus 3 is going to be negative 5 degrees Celsius. So I need to come up here. My difference was, my difference is 3. My difference is 3. My dry is -2. -2 go up. So my relative humidity is 37%. All right, I want you to notice something. So the first one is going to be 0. And if I'm looking at my dew point, notice that my dry bulb temperature and my wet bulb temperature are the same. All right, so that means no water evaporated. And we talked about, well, what's that mean? We talked about that the air is fully saturated. So if my difference between wet and dry is 0, no matter what temperature the dry bulb temperature is, the relative humidity is 100%. So wet bulb, dry bulb, the same. Relative humidity is 100%. If your relative humidity is 100%, you're likely to have precipitation. So the closer the dew point is to my air temperature, more saturated, more likely to have precipitation. Hopefully this helps.